12 names, 12 deaths, every one of them written down in the Bible, and almost none of them ended the way you would guess. Some were kings, some commanded armies. One of them sat at the same table as Jesus. We begin with the largest man on the field and the smallest weapon anyone brought that day. Goliath fought for the Philistines, and for 40 days straight he walked into the valley of Elah to insult the entire army of Israel. 1 Samuel describes a man over 9 feet tall, in bronze scale armor that weighed more than most soldiers could even carry. Not one man in Saul's camp would face him. Then a shepherd boy turned up at the front line, delivering bread and cheese to his older brothers. David refused the king's armor, the king's helmet, and the king's sword. He walked down to a stream and picked out 5 smooth stones instead. He did not wait to be attacked. He ran straight at the Philistine line, spun the sling once, and let a single stone go. It hit Goliath above the eyes and buried itself there. The giant fell forward onto his face, and David finished him with the giant's own sword. The best-armed man in the valley was undone by the one weapon nobody had thought to defend against. Sisera commanded the Canaanite army that had held Israel down for 20 years, and his 900 iron chariots made him look untouchable. In the book of Judges, his forces are finally shattered by Deborah and Barak, but Deborah had already warned that the glory would go to a woman. Sisera abandoned his chariot and ran. Exhausted, he reached the tent of a woman named Jael, who gave him milk and covered him while he slept. He thought he was safe. As he slept, Jael picked up a tent peg and a mallet and drove the peg through his temple into the ground beneath him. The general who commanded hundreds of chariots never woke up. He was killed with a piece of camping equipment. Eglon was the king of Moab, and he ruled over Israel for 18 years. Scripture goes out of its way to describe him as an extremely heavy man. Israel sent its tribute with a man named Ehud, who was left-handed. He strapped a short double-edged blade to his right thigh. The side guards never searched. Once the tribute was delivered, Ehud came back alone and told the king he was carrying a secret message from God. Eglon cleared the entire room. In the cool upper chamber, with the doors shut, Ehud struck once. Then he locked the doors behind him and walked straight out past the guards. The servants waited outside for hours, assuming the king wanted privacy. By the time anyone unlocked that room, Moab's king had been dead a long while. Abimelech took power by hiring mercenaries and killing 70 of his own brothers, and Judges says he ruled Israel by force for 3 years. His reign collapsed into open war with the same city that had put him in charge. The fighting carried him to a town called Thebes. The whole population had locked itself inside one strong tower. Abimelech walked up to the door carrying fire, planning to burn them out. A woman on the roof pushed a millstone over the edge. It came down on his head and cracked his skull. Dying, he begged his armor-bearer to run him through, so nobody could ever say a woman had killed him. His last thought was his reputation. Absalom was King David's son, famous across Israel for his looks, and for hair so thick that his annual haircut was weighed like treasure. He spent years quietly turning the country against his father, then declared himself king. The two armies met in the dense forest of Ephraim. When the battle turned against him, Absalom fled on a mule. It carried him under a huge oak, and his head jammed fast in the branches. The mule kept running. He was left hanging in midair, alive, while a soldier ran to report it to Joab, who had direct orders to spare him. Joab ignored those orders, put 3 javelins through him while he hung there, and buried him under a heap of stones. Tradition says it was that famous hair that trapped him. Korah was a Levite who decided Moses had taken too much authority, and he pulled 250 respected leaders into a rebellion with him. Their argument was a popular one. The whole community is holy, so why should any single man stand above everyone else? Moses told the people to back away from the rebels' tents, then set a test. If these men die normally, he said, then God never sent me. But if the ground opens up and takes them down alive, you will know. Numbers says he had barely finished the sentence. The earth split open under the rebels and swallowed them, their families and everything they owned, then closed over again. Everyone nearby ran from the sound. Jezebel was the most feared woman in Israel, remembered for pushing the worship of Baal and for hunting down the prophets of the Lord. Elijah made one very specific prediction about her. Dogs would eat her body inside the walls of Jezreel. For years, nothing happened. Then a commander named Jehu was anointed king and rode for the city. Jezebel painted her eyes, arranged her hair, and waited at an upper window. She met him with an insult, not a plea. Jehu called up and asked who inside was on his side, and her own servants threw her out of the window. He went inside and ate dinner. When he finally sent men to bury a king's daughter, all they found was a skull, 2 feet, and a pair of hands. Ahab is remembered as one of the worst kings Israel ever had, condemned by Elijah for idolatry and for the judicial murder of a man named Naboth. Elijah told him that dogs would lick up his blood in the exact place they had licked up Naboth's. Ahab spent years trying to outrun that sentence. At Ramoth-Gilead, a prophet warned he would not come home alive, so Ahab dressed as an ordinary soldier and left his royal robes behind. An enemy archer fired into the crowd without aiming at anyone in particular. The arrow slipped through the one gap between the plates of Ahab's armor. He was propped upright in his chariot until sunset. When the chariot was later washed out, the dogs came, exactly as Elijah had said they would. Haman was the highest official in the Persian Empire under King Xerxes, and one man in the entire capital refused to bow to him. That man was Mordecai, a Jew. Rather than punish one person, Haman got permission to wipe out every Jew in the empire and cast lots to choose the date. As a warm-up, he had a gallows built at his own house, 75 feet high, put up for one specific man. What he did not know was that Queen Esther was Jewish and Mordecai's cousin. At a private banquet, she named Haman to his face in front of the king. The king stormed out. A servant mentioned the gallows, and Haman was executed on the structure he had built for somebody else. Belshazzar ruled Babylon near the height of its power, and the book of Daniel records one banquet where he hosted 1,000 of his nobles. He ordered the sacred cups looted from the temple in Jerusalem brought out, so his guests could drink wine from them. While they were drinking, a hand appeared with no body attached to it, and began writing on the plaster of the palace wall. The king went pale, and his knees gave out. None of his advisors could read it, so Daniel was sent for. Numbered, weighed, divided. He had been weighed and found light, and Babylon would be handed to the Medes and Persians. That same night the city fell, and Belshazzar was killed. Judas Iscariot spent years inside Jesus' inner circle and carried the group's money back. He agreed to hand him over for 30 pieces of silver. He did it with a kiss, in a garden, at night, so the soldiers would know which man to arrest in the dark. Matthew says the guilt caught up with him almost immediately. He tried to give the silver back, threw it down on the temple floor, and hanged himself. Acts tells it differently. There, the money buys a field, Judas falls headlong in it, and his body splits open. Locals called the place the Field of Blood. 2 books, 2 versions, and centuries of argument. The most famous betrayal in history has an ending the Bible records twice, and not the same way. Herod Agrippa was the grandson of Herod the Great. He executed the Apostle James with a sword and had Peter arrested with the same plan in mind. At a festival in Caesarea, he came out to address the crowd. Josephus says his robe was woven through with silver and caught the morning sun. The crowd shouted that this was the voice of a god and not of a man. Agrippa heard it and said nothing. Acts says he was struck down in that same instant, eaten by worms, and died. Josephus describes sudden agony and 5 more days of it. The king who let a crowd call him a god died at his own festival, in front of the people who had just crowned him one. 12 endings, 12 reversals, and every one of them written down thousands of years before anybody thought to put it on a screen. If you want more of these, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which of these deaths you think was the strangest, and who I should cover next.